प्रकार के लोगों के प्रति संविधान और विधि के अनुसार न्याय करूंगा। नवंबर
Welcome to this very special edition, 4 years of the Modi government, the street verdict, and over the course of the next 30 minutes, we will get you some of the most influential market voices to talk about what they make of Modi's 4 years in office, how Prime Minister Modi and his government have fared in the last 4 years for the economy and for the markets. Joining us is a high-powered panel of market experts and veteran investors. We have Bhansali, Porinju Veliyath, Manishi Ray Chaudhary, as well as Nilesh Shah of Kotak AMC, all joining us through the course of the next 30 minutes to give us their views and perspective. Thanks very much, all of you, for joining in this evening. It's really about, putting an account to what Prime Minister Modi and his team has done over the course of the last 4 years. 4 years done of his 5-year tenure, and the next 1 year becomes even more critical in terms of assessing what his government would do to ensure being re-elected. Mr. Bhansali, let me start off with you first then. Give us a rating. Give us how much you would rate the Modi government's performance in the first 4 years.
I'm extremely happy with it, that given the potential of the country, we need very decisive and very nationalistic government, and Mr. Modi has provided that. It's very purposeful, very effortful, well directed. Results take time, so that's a different issue, but I rate it 10 on 10 on intent and effort.
Right, intent is great, effort is great, but what about the timing of introducing some path-breaking reforms, whether it was GST, demonetization or IBC?
Some of that, I don't agree with any of your points. I think this country has been, shortchanged for so long that you had to move on. And you never know, while Mr. Modi does look like coming back in 2019, but you never know. So he was a man in hurry. Demonetization was an experimental thing. The whole world didn't know how it can go or how it would go, but he made that effort to break the back of black money economy in the country. So I think that was the only time he had between various state elections and central elections, etc. And also, the GST had to be rolled out by a certain time, otherwise it would have been, almost kind of out of bounds. So working backward from election to GST to this. Coming to GST, I think GST was the first truly federal law where a lot of, interests, points of view, needs, etc. were all taken into account, and therefore it became what it became, multi-layer, multi-party, phased manner, etc. Yet I think when the history of GST is written, it would come out as one of the most extraordinary implementations of GST. The revenue from GST has already started to go up. The complaints have started to come down. So you're seeing a structural problem in the economy and our culture, where people were just not used to paying tax or keeping accounts. So those are the ones who are still making a lot of noise about it. But the rest of the din has gone down within a few, which is, last 9-10 months. I think which is extremely satisfactory. So I think in about 15 months time, GST will have been, regularized in our life and culture, which is amongst the fastest rollouts. So I don't think GST has had anything except a positive effect on our economy. And the last thing you said was demonetization, GST and IBC. IBC was something which was in the making for 20 years. No government showed the kind of resolve that this government did. And the first resolution already happened, 3-4 more will happen soon. And in any reform of that kind, where we had vested interest so deeply entrenched, and also processes that we had to evolve over a period of time, what an RP can do, what creditor committee can do, and so on and so forth. I think this has been a rather short fuse that in a few months, we have had the first one out. We will have a few more. The amendments have started to happen. The high-powered committee under the financials, under government secretary, etc. Details are not important. But I feel IBC is a reform, according to me, which is even bigger than GST. So I think IBC is all right. In a country like India, we take a few months. So I think I have no problem with the timing at all.
All right. Mr. Bhansali, point well taken. Nilesh, come to you. Let's start by understanding broadly how you rate the work the government has done in the 4 years under Prime Minister Narendra Modi's leadership.
See, the glass is either half full or half empty. There are lots of work done and there are lots of work yet to be done. But I just want to bring one pointer to the attention of viewers. In 2014, India was the 10th largest economy in the world in US dollar terms. In 2018, we will be the 5th largest economy in the world in US dollar terms. In 4 years, we have moved 5 ranks. We have surpassed Brazil, Canada, Russia, France, and United Kingdom. Is it a matter of pride for us that after almost 200 years, we have overtaken our colonial master, United Kingdom? I think it's a matter of great pride for all Indians that now our economy is bigger than United Kingdom. This is the fastest ever growth rate where India jumped 5 spots in 4 years. And I think that should give viewers an indication as to what kind of work has been done.
Porinju, when bad elements are being targeted, do you think structural growth in India can continue?
Structural growth just started, not coming back. We were in a bad shape, See, basically all politicians are corrupt. Most politicians, I would say. So we needed a change because of this corruption at all levels in the country. Nedas and Babus. This was the biggest block for India's economic growth. And that is the reason we have 500 million Indians in poverty. So the structural change is required to remove this poverty, and that is possible only by a higher economic growth, a faster economic progress. And I appreciate it. The current governments, I'm not having any political affiliations, especially our leader Narendra Modi has been initiating many very important, much required reforms like GST or demonetization, all those kind of things, with the purpose, with the intention to reduce this corruption and black money and unorganized economy, thriving, all those things. But the bad people are affected. All the most corrupt. See, basically politicians are corrupt in India in the last many decades. So the most corrupt political parties and the most corrupt political leaders, they all are getting together, despite their rivalry among them, getting together to stop this move of the economy or the political move to reform the economy.
Right. Manishi, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate Prime Minister Modi's first 4 years in office?
Slightly difficult question, but I would possibly give it a rating of 8, which means quite significantly positive, particularly in relation to the recent historical past. There are quite a few important reform processes that have been set in motion. Implementation of GST, financial penetration into rural and semi-urban areas through Jan Dhan, and expansion of DBT, the Direct Benefit Transfer Scheme, to more than 450 government schemes. These are some of the important achievements, and these would obviously have a long-term beneficial effect on the economy, even though the short term might be a bit wobbly as a consequence of implementation of many of these.
Nilesh, critics say a lot of previous policies were being followed rather than real innovation by this government. Where do you see the reality in that claim?
As an investor, we are interested in outcome. We are happy that as a country we have continuity of policy and continuity of reforms. But what we need is speed. For example, in solar, we have abundant sun energy. But in first 67 years our independence, we have built 2,635 megawatt of solar power. In last 4 years, FY14 to FY18, we have multiplied that 8 times to reach 21,789 megawatt of solar power. Now, if we maintain this pace, at some point of time in future over next 10-15 years, our dependence upon oil will get reduced. And that is what we need. We have to leverage our natural resources for our benefit. If there is continuity in policy, all the more better.
Mr. Bhansali, for the markets again, they have inherited a part of the strong bull market that we are witnessing right now. So the government in that ways has seen the good part of this bull market. And with LTCG, that development has left investors confused about the long-term investment calls in India. Do you think this was pretty much a one step forward, two steps back sort of a move by the government, puncturing a fairly buoyant investor-friendly climate?
I think when in the very first year, the world markets were not really buoyant and so on. So, we have had some overlap, and some of it has been, good or bad, which is purely local. Yes, LTCG has been a controversial move, and government, after all, may not be able to mobilize the kind of estimate they have in the budget. So, I do agree with the reservations on LTCG. But on the whole, if you look at the FDI inflows, if you look at divestments, if you look at broadening of the mutual fund market, we have never had expansion of the mutual fund market of the kind that we have had. So, last was in the early 90s, and then for a brief period in the first decade, or the last decade, first few years, that we saw, some fair equity participation. So, it's after a long time that we are seeing this broad-based equity participation by allowing pension funds, provident funds, etc., all to come into markets. So, I think this government has done a lot to broad-base and strengthen the market, except LTCG, because I think whatever has happened, I don't know how beneficial this will prove to be to our fiscal situation.
Right. Porinju, bold steps taken to solve problem areas to quickly essentially bring about an investor-friendly market. Is that the key for higher markets, you think, going forward, that the government is kind of building a conducive environment to draw in more investments?
Very fast is possible. It will take time. It's because this is a 70 years of decline in the values in the politics. And it will take at least 10 to 15 years to reverse it. So it's not an easy thing, to bring down the corruption from high level to lowest level, from the village office peon to the cabinet minister. India is corrupt. Unless we change this, we cannot grow well. And we will, yeah.
Right. Mr. Bhansali, the state of the banks, it gets messier by the day. Every time we hear this is the bottom for all the bad news, more bad news unfolds. How much has the government done to put a system in place?
I think the whole bank nationalization was one of the most unfortunate things that happened to our country. It served no purpose except creating, weaknesses and so on. Maybe in the first 20 years, we were able to penetrate banking into remote areas and rural areas, etc. But that did not really result in creating a banking habit. So I think it is in the last few years that we have created this Jan Dhan kind of movement, and a lot of microfinance institutions, small banks and private banks who have done a lot more in terms of those objectives. So if you create banks which without any provision for top quality bankers, you have a major problem. In the very first year, this government tried to bring lateral hiring to the banks to bring bright bankers. It didn't succeed much, and that is no fault of theirs because the morass is so deep. So what you're seeing is really the result of a very bad move that the country went through of socializing and nationalizing banks. because you do not attract the best talent, and the banking is one sector where talent matters tremendously. It's not a cement factory that anybody can run. So I think until we are able to, this aggressive change and aggressive cleanup of the banks can only help. We will need consolidation, and it's a huge problem that we have created over the last, 30, 40 years. So it will take time.
Right, Mr. Bhansali. But Nilesh, same question to you. How do you rate the banking sector? The insolvency board that has stepped up on the whole NPA resolution process. Solutions have started like the Tata Steel, Bhushan Steel issue, for example. That's giving much hope to the market about, things turning around actually.
Clearly, there was a period where there were huge amount of NPAs which were not disclosed. In fact, they were evergreen and hence they created bigger NPAs. And most of the time, the adage was that it's the companies which go bankrupt, but never the promoter. Obviously, we needed to change this mentality, and this mentality can be changed with the combined effort of banks, judiciary, government, and the borrowers themselves. In the past, we have seen in America, a company like General Motors, which was pride of America, was put into bankruptcy in 2008, and today it's again growing and surviving and prospering. We had no such mechanism, and the existing mechanisms of BIFR and debt recovery tribunals were actually not working out. Clearly, over the last 4 years, we have seen insolvency process being modified, NCLT getting introduced, and for the first time we have seen a resolution of an NPA of the extent of Bhushan Steel, where Tata Steel went and acquired it. So clearly this is something which we need to move forward, and again, as I mentioned, speed is the essence. We need to copy Western world, where they don't mind putting company into insolvency, they don't mind putting that into bankruptcy protection and getting a solution out rather than sweeping NPAs below the carpet. More we face the reality, better for all of us.
Right, Porinju, do you think financial inclusion will drive domestic inflows in the markets? We've already seen a fair amount of conviction coming in from domestic investors, which has been such a new chapter in terms of the money flooding the markets, where it's really the rise of the domestic investor and he being a part of the India growth story.
No, these things are not very important. It is all, every government do some themes, try to rejuvenate the economy or investing culture. These all are good, but nothing. It's not any game changer as it is. The game changer is what the big actions, the big reforms in the economy, like the GST or kind of things, or even the the bankruptcy court, the NCLT things. These all are big game changer things implemented by this government. I really appreciate that, without any political bias. But things are looking, not very easy, because the corrupt people who are affected by these reforms are all getting together to stop it. That's the problem.
Porinju, what do you expect to happen after, perhaps in due course of time, 1 year remaining for the government as they complete their first 5-year tenure? What do you hope for India as an economy, as a market, if the same government continues?
Why 6 years? I normally hear people talking 5 years or 10 years. Anyway, see, India will continue to progress. We'll have this, much higher kind of economic growth, especially after these kind of reforms being implemented. When this, more formal economy develops, more of white than the black happens in the economy. So we are in a faster economic progress kind of a period. So that will continue, irrespective, or I would say despite politicians. Now, one need not really bet too much on politics. It would have been wonderful if our politicians all become, committed to the country and are trying to develop the economy. Or I would say in simple terms, if these political leaders keep, the nation above self, it's wonderful. We will overtake America in the next 25 years.
Oh yes, indeed. That's wonderful to hear. Manishi, What about your own view on India's future, having interacted with a lot of overseas investors?
So, there have been some changes in views of late, which I must highlight. Overseas investors are still overweight India. Both investors who are benchmarked to MSCI Asia ex Japan and investors who are benchmarked to emerging markets. But the extent of their overweight has actually declined over past couple of years. They had almost about 5 to 6% overweight compared to the benchmark about a couple of years ago. That has now declined to just about 2 to 3%. One reason for this is, of course, the relative slowdown that India went through in 2017, post demonetization and GST, and also the relative valuation premium of India, which was not quite getting justified by the pedestrian earnings environment. Earnings estimates in India continued to drift down, while earnings estimates in her North Asian cousins like China and Korea have been moving up over past 9 to 12 months. So I think over the very long term, the foreign investors still remain positive on India because of various reasons. Economic growth momentum, because of a very young workforce and a young population, is likely to be maintained. The ease of selection of companies to invest in, that's quite significant for India. I mean, the top 50 or top 100 companies have a strong growth story attached to them. They have relatively better corporate governance, in the Asian and emerging market context and so on. But having said that, while that long-term outlook remains intact, I think the short term has been a bit concerning for overseas investors as far as India is concerned.
Right, and that brings me to Mr. Bhansali, your opinion. One more year to go for the government. What do you hope to see from the markets and in terms of economic development over the course of the next 12 months?
So we see two trends in the economy. You're seeing, a cyclical upturn. You're seeing very strong demand almost across these sectors, and the formalization of the economy through, the effect of demonetization, that is digitalization, and GST. So all of those have kicked in, but they are being, challenged by the high oil price, rupee exchange rate, interest rates, and so on. So normally in an uptrend, early in the uptrend, your ability to bear all the shocks and high interest rates particularly is generally high. So we may do all right. So if I think oil reverses or oil doesn't go, run away as in the 70s or 80s, I think we should still be okay, because I think you're going to see fair bit of demand, along with demand growth, you're going to see production growth, and therefore inflation may not run away if we have a good monsoon. But if we have oil price and rupee both coming together, then the inflation issue comes into play big time. So I would keep my fingers crossed, but otherwise also in an election year, purely from an investment point of view, people will be cautious.
And Nilesh, finally, same question to you. How do you see the next year panning out in lieu of what is expected from the government in its last 12 months in office?
I think one biggest area of concern for me today is our ballooning trade deficit with China. There are very few countries of our size whose trade deficit with China as a percentage of GDP is as high as India. In US, we have seen they moving heaven and earth to reduce Chinese trade deficit, and China is now agreeing to buy more American goods. Clearly, we also need to copy American model to negotiate with China. Their official trade deficit is about $52 billion a year. And if we take into account Hawala payments, then probably it's $60 billion a year. This is impacting our small and medium enterprises. This is hurting our core manufacturing sector. And we must negotiate with China hard to reduce this trade deficit. They must import goods from us, services from us. And that reduction not only will help us on current account, but it will also protect our small and medium enterprises and manufacturing base. clearly we need to manage trade deficit with China in a far better manner than what we have done in the past.
All right, gentlemen, thanks very much for taking out the time to be a part of our special programming here, assessing the Modi government's 4 years in office and also giving us your perspective on what you expect from the next 12 months, which are going to be really a litmus test for the government in its proposition to get re-elected. Thanks very much once again for joining in.